Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about the world. But not this one. I mean this one. The one that you actually live your entire life within. This one is completely outside of your conscious control, right? But this one, you have the power to change. And I've personally found that through putting nearly all of my focus on this one here, everything, and I mean everything in my life has got and continues to get better. And here's why. So the other day I had a little bit of an existential crisis. Not really, but basically I was in a cognition lecture at uni and something came up that completely blew my mind, right? We were looking at the phenomena of perception, and the lecturer said that it's not actually obvious that the world, the physical world outside, right, is the same thing as the world we experience psychologically. And this is because it's not obvious that me and you and everyone else actually see and perceive the world in the same way. Now, I'm going to explain this. It's going to get a little bit complicated, but I trust that you can stay with me. So when you're a child, everything is new, right? Because you've just been born. So to learn about the world, you have to interact with the world with all of its objects and figure out how the hell things work. But from doing that, you build up assumptions of how the world works and predictions of how things usually go, right? And these assumptions, they then inform your perceptions. And what your perceptions are the meaning that you derive from the experiences you have in the world. And it's your perceptions that then manage your behavior, and it's how you sort of decide how to act and how to feel. Now, what's so interesting is that over time, these assumptions become so accurate, right? And they happen so quickly that you don't realize that you begin to live not in the physical world, but in a mentally represented version of the world in your mind based on those assumptions and predictions. But the best way for me to try and explain this, and so it doesn't sound like a load of jargon, is to use some simple examples. This is a basic object, and when you look at this object, you don't actually see what's physically there, right? You don't see paper and ink. What you see is a book. You see a catalogue of knowledge or a story. You see something you could read. You see a function. You see how this object works and what you think you can do with it, rather than the physical object itself. Or when you're betrayed by a friend or a partner, right, you go into a state of shock or trauma. And that's because the person that you thought they were, i.e. how they fitted into your mentally represented world, is revealed as not true. And that is a shocking, painful experience. And this is why I think people can believe things that just aren't objectively true, because the brain isn't really in alignment with reality most of the time. The brain creates a reality based on how you assume the world should and does work. And this is because of one key bit of information that was the main message of the perception lecture I had at uni, and that is that sensation and perception are not the same thing. Your sense organs sense the world, right? And that sensory information is processed in your brain. But it is your mental frame, right, how you view the world, your mindset, that determines the perceptions that you gather from those sensations. And it's your perceptions that determine the way you feel and the way you act. And the great thing is, your mental frame, your mindset, the way that your brain interprets signals from the world is malleable and can be consciously worked on by you. Now, this is no longer some spiritual woo-woo reading The Secret by Rhonda Byrne once and thinking,
ooh, everything happens for a reason, ooh, fate, and ooh, trust in the stars.
No, mate, this is psychological science about how your brain works. And if you still think that focusing on your mindset and your mental frame is a waste of time and not for you, then all I can say is good luck, bro. Because happiness and deep fulfillment and deep joy aren't just gonna fall in your lap from the sky. They're not just gonna knock on your door, walk into your room and jump into your brain. It doesn't work like that. It's not that simple. And I think you have to consciously work on it. But the good thing is, I have true faith that it's possible for everyone to make things better by focusing on your mental frame. So, rant over. Let's get into the methods of how I'm trying to reframe my mind to change the world. So I basically believe that your view of the world right now exists as a hierarchy with 3 stages, kind of similar to the humanist psychologist Abraham Maslow's classic theory of the hierarchy of needs. And at the base of this hierarchy is your core assumptions about how the world works, right? And I personally think that there are 3 baseline core assumptions that you need to adopt in your life for everything else to fall into place. And these are the things that I've come to over the past 2 or 3 years. So the first one for me is agency. Now, I've talked about this in a couple of videos in the past, but what agency means to me is you feel that you are consciously in control of your destiny and your outcomes in your life and the actions you take on a day-to-day basis. With agency, you live your life by some sort of design rather than living your life by default. And with agency, you happen to the world rather than the world happening to you. Now, secondly, after agency, I think you have to have this core assumption that shit matters. Now, what I mean by that is that what you do in the world every single day is important, right? It's an argument against nihilism. It's the assumption that what you do affects the wider world, and you actually have a responsibility to make this world a better place rather than a worse place. And lastly, the third sort of core baseline assumption I think is incredibly important to have is that if something is difficult, it's often an indicator that it is worth doing. Because I don't think it's a good approach to be afraid of discomfort or difficulty in life, because if that's the case, then life is just going to get the better of you. Because the reality is that life is hard for all of us in our different contexts, our different situations. We're all going to face discomfort and difficulty. And if you don't have the mental resources and the beliefs to keep going when things get difficult, then nothing's really going to change. So from our core assumptions, those three baseline beliefs, and you can have others beyond that you gather from your own experience, but they're my main three. From those, we move up to the second tier of the hierarchy, which I'm calling optimistic realism. And this is an overall way of looking at the world that's a nice balance between the sort of blind optimism that people sort of disdain and this cynicism that seems to be so popular at the moment, and this negative, pessimistic view of the world. Now, at its core, optimistic realism is being able to tilt your perspectives on all situations to see the logical, rational, positive aspects that are actually there. I talk about this in a little bit more detail in the free course that you can find in the description if you're interested, but it's not the same as blind optimism, and I'll give you an example of why that is. Let's say it's raining, right? There's a big storm, thrashing rainwater against your windows, and you're just starting to feel depressed about that, right? The blind optimist perspective is,
I'm wishing for sunshine. Well, this is great. I'm loving this, right?
when the reality is you're not feeling great about it, and the sun isn't just going to magically manifest in the sky. But the optimistic realism perspective is to not wish for sunshine, but instead learn to dance in the rain and find the beauty and the calm in the storm. And then the final tier of the hierarchy, working up once you have the first two stages, is about the different frames that we can view the world within. Now, you can adopt different frames of viewing the world at different times, in different situations, and you can even wear multiple at once to sort of view what's going on around you. It's kind of like when you were in school, right, and you did sort of a scientific experiment with a microscope and there'd be different levels of magnification. These are just different lenses that you're perceiving the world, right? They're sort of like different narratives or stories that you're painting over your experience that inform you on what to perceive and therefore how to feel and how to act. I think if you don't pick your mental frames consciously, if you don't decide what story you're going to tell yourself about yourself and your life, then the human mind will do it for you, because that's sort of the tendency that we live within. We view our lives as a story in our memories and in our experiences. So I'll take you through now a couple of mental frames that I'm trying to adopt in my own life to sort of show some examples and make it seem a bit more concrete. The first one is that I'm trying to adopt in my educational life and my sport and in my content creation, that I have all the power. And basically you've got me now on one side of a spectrum and my goals on the other side of the spectrum, and in between these is just a big block of work that I'm capable of doing over the next few years. Secondly, this is one I've learned from Chris Williamson on his podcast Modern Wisdom with Alex Hormozy, the episode that came out about a month ago, where he said your life can be perceived as a movie or a hero story, right? And the hero, i.e. you or I, would be doing something in this moment. And what would that be in their hero story? What could I do right now to fulfill the hero's journey that I'm on? And I'll give you one more example. This comes from the conversation I had with an actual Hare Krishna monk on me and my cousin's podcast. And also I've gathered this from my own spiritual reflection over the past few months. And that is that one of the best metrics to evaluate our life on is peace of mind, rather than material possessions or status. And this frame, like measuring myself on how I feel and the peace in my own brain, is a good way that I've been able to manage my desires and my expectations as I've navigated life recently. Now, obviously, I think that was a lot of information to take in, and you might not sort of understand it all at once, and that's fine, because you can rewatch this video and go through the hierarchy again and build your own hierarchy, etc., etc. But the important thing is you've taken a good step in like starting to learn about how the way that you think can change the world that you experience. This is a individual journey of self-discovery, basically, that we're all on at different stages and at different rates, but it's going to take a long while. But that's the beauty of it, right? You can just generate these better perceptions and better mental frames as you navigate the world and you get older. But what I will do is, before I end this video, I'll leave you with something that I think is quite crucial and valuable from my own experience. I've realized that the only way to create a lasting change in the way that you think about yourself and the world, and the way that you adopt sort of new beliefs and new lenses to see the world through, is through gathering some kind of proof. And proof comes from doing work and from taking action. So for example, in the past 6 months, I've been trying to improve my self-confidence as an athlete on the basketball court. And with the little incremental bits of progress I've made with that, they haven't been through shouting affirmations in the mirror or watching like motivational videos of Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan and shit like that, right? It's been from the hours of training that I've been doing. It's from the sort of 1 to 2 days a week of waking up at 5:40 a.m. and going to a training session before a lecture. Those sort of dark moments where the voices in my head are telling me to stay in the warm bed and not go out and venture forth into the world, those moments when I sort of satisfy the goal and I fulfill that and I go and do the session, that proof has then changed the way I think about myself as an athlete. And from seeing that in myself, like being able to show up and stick to the program and do things that are difficult and pursue excellence in my sport, it has reframed the way that I think about myself and what I'm capable of. And I'm seeing the results in that incrementally as the months go by. So I want to leave this video and I want to leave you with an important question that I want you to go and think about for the rest of today, right? And it's something that I'm trying to think about all the time. And that is, how different, how much better could your life actually look? Like, how much better could you feel? And how much better would you show up for other people and yourself if you changed the story that you tell yourself about who you are? And with that said, thank you so much for watching. I hope this video has provided you with some kind of value. And if you want to continue your journey down the Joel Clifton psychology self-development rabbit hole, you can watch this video here that I worked pretty hard on. But with that said, again, thank you. And I wish you the very best of luck on your self-development journey, aiming to reframe your mind and change the world.